you ever ask yourself, how good are my communication skills? No, me neither. We take it for granted, don't we? But if you think about it, communication has a direct effect on things like your ability to solve problems, job interviews, work in general, sales, negotiation, your personal relationships. Almost every aspect of our lives is affected by our ability to communicate with other people. And yet we rarely sit down and look at what's involved in effective communication. How do we communicate? Well, whenever two people have a conversation or more, there is a sender, the person with the information, and there is a receiver, the person who wants the information. Now the sender has to take whatever's in their head and turn it into a message, and that process is called encoding. That message is then passed to the receiver, who then has to turn that into something in their head, and that process is called decoding. Now, it may sound quite complicated, and it is. It's quite a sophisticated system, but we do it all the time, so we take it for granted. But there are lots of opportunities in those steps for little errors to emerge and change the finished meaning. If you've ever played Chinese whispers as a child, you'll know how that works. So how do we make that communication model work in the real world? Well, the way we do it is always two-way. So in other words, imagine somebody's giving you complicated directions. You've got to go down here, you turn right, you go around the roundabout, you go over the bridge, and so on. You would never just listen and then drive off. You would check. You would say, so I go down here and then turn right, and then I go around the roundabout and over the bridge. We summarize, we clarify, we ask questions. And what we're doing is we're keeping it a two-way process, and we're making sure we haven't picked up any mistakes, any errors in that process. We're making sure we understand in our heads what the sender meant in their mind when they started talking. So the important principle for communication in general is that it has to be two-way. It isn't just about you passing information to the other person. It's about the two of you interacting. It's got to be two-way if it's going to be effective. So that message obviously involves words, but there's also a lot of other information packed into it in the form of non-verbal communication that often gets overlooked but is really important. We are very sophisticated, most people, at reading that non-verbal communication and getting a lot of meaning from it. To illustrate that, I'm going to show you now some faces, and I want you to guess what the emotion is purely from their facial expression. So don't overthink it, just see how fast you can come up with something, okay? So the first one is happiness. Number 2, sadness. Number 3, disgust. Number 4, fear. Number 5, surprise. Number 6, anger. So how did you do? Most people don't really struggle with that. They can usually within a second or two work out what the emotion is, what the meaning is from those facial expressions. Unless you've got a condition such as autism, for example, where people can find it quite difficult to read the subtext, read between the lines, read the facial expressions, get a meaning from it. Those people often take the words very literally and give them a lot more meaning, whereas people who don't have those conditions often take more information from the non-verbal than they do from the words. That exercise isn't much of a struggle for them. So the non-verbal communication is very important, and I want to look at just 4 aspects of it in a little bit more detail. So let's take a look at eye contact. Good eye contact signifies that you are giving the other person your full attention. you are showing them a certain amount of respect, and you're interested in what they've got to say. Now, if someone doesn't give you eye contact and they don't look you in the eye, we have a tendency to find that a little bit uncomfortable, a little bit unnerving. They come across as maybe a bit shifty, a bit dodgy. It's not a good thing really if someone can't look you in the eye from a Western society point of view. You know, it's worth noting that that's not the same around the world. In some societies, strong eye contact is almost seen as aggressive, and as a sign of respect, people will avoid looking you in the eye. And that's a respectful thing. So this, when we talk about eye contact and lots of aspects of communication skills, we have to recognise there are cultural differences, and in a diverse society you may come across those, so be aware of that. But for general terms, and to keep this video nice and short, I'm going to talk from a Western European point of view. So in that point of view, strong eye contact is very important when we talk about communication. It really helps with everything else we're trying to do. Body language. It's a complicated subject and there's a lot of myths around it. So here's a question for you. In body language terms, what does this mean when I fold my arms? Now, a lot of people will say it means I want to be left alone, or I don't want to talk to anybody. I'm very standoffish or authoritarian or something. But it could also mean that I'm cold. You know, I'm just cold. Or it could mean that, as I used to do, I worked in a uniform job once where I wasn't allowed to put my hands in my pockets. It was against the code of conduct. So I'd just do this because it just tied my hands up so I didn't have to think about them. Or it could mean that I've got a back injury and this is the only position that actually relieves the pain a little bit. So one of the key things we need to understand about body language is that no one signal has any one meaning. Experts in body language will tell you that they need clusters of signals. They need lots of signals before they can start to derive a meaning from it. And they also like to know what the context is. So if lots of people are all standing like this outside in February and none of them got coats on, they've not all just become very standoffish. They're cold. That's the context and that's what it means, okay? So don't look for simple answers in body language. Having said that though, there is one simple rule that we can, that is of use to us in communication, and that is this. This, along with crossing your legs and lots of other things, is perceived to be a closed body language signal. And closed body language signals, whatever reason you're doing them, can come across to the other person as, leave me alone, go away, I don't want to talk to you. The opposite of closed is obviously open body language signals. Open body language signals are warm, welcoming, and then if you want people to feel relaxed around you, uncross your legs, unfold your arms, face them and open yourself up to them. These open body language signals really help people engage with you and communicate with you. That's what you should be aiming for. Open body language. Personal space. There's a lot to personal space and you don't necessarily need to know all of it, but I'll give you a little bit of background information. How big is personal space? Well, a lot of people tell me it's this big or that big. It's basically arm's length. But that obviously varies because different people have different length arms. There's a bit more to it than that in reality. Our personal space varies depending on a number of factors. The most important one of those is our relationship to the other person. So we tend to have a stranger distance, we'll have an acquaintance distance, a friend distance, and an intimate distance. And depending what your relationship is to those people, you will feel more or less comfortable at different distances. It's also affected by if you grow up in the countryside, you tend to have bigger distances than people who grow up in the city, in an urban environment. If you grow up in Northern Europe, they tend to have bigger personal distances than people who grow up in Southern Europe. So there are cultural differences to it. And we tend to think of it, our personal space, as a big donut-shaped circle around us, and it's not. It's in front of us and it's behind us. We don't like people being behind us that we can't see. But not so much at the sides. We're okay with people being quite close to us side to side in things like lifts, etc. Not at the moment, of course, with social distancing. I think it may be interesting to see if that changes things long term, with everyone trying to stay at the moment 2 meters apart from everybody. But there's all this variation on how we feel in our distancing between ourselves and other people. You don't need to remember any of that. All you really need to remember is this: if you are too close to somebody else, it makes them feel uncomfortable. We call it a trigger in conflict management. It's something that winds people up. And if we want to get on with people and be an effective communicator, we don't want to wind people up. So, if in doubt, just take a step back. You'd be surprised the difference a few inches, a few centimeters can make. Okay? If just people are very sensitive to that boundary. So if you think, oh, this is getting a bit tense, or this is a bit of a difficult conversation, just back off a little bit. Give somebody a little bit more space, and you'll be surprised at how much they can start to relax or get less annoyed or angry or tense or even emotional if you just give them a bit more space. Okay? So the main thing to remember about personal space is, if in doubt, back off. Tone of voice. Our tone of voice will go up and down and modulate, etc. as we speak, as well as the pacing and the rhythm of how we say things. If someone is emotional or angry or upset, often they can say one line of words and it can have different meanings depending on the tone of voice within it. This is something that actors use all the time to convey emotion. They could say a line of dialogue that's actually quite boring, but we can get a lot more meaning from the tone of voice and how they say it. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. So I want to talk to you now about the 2 strongest communication skills you can develop. The first one is empathy, and the second one is active listening. Now then, empathy, what is it? Empathy is looking at the situation from the other person's point of view. Why is that important? Well, our ability to look at the situation from the other person's point of view through what they're going through will give us an insight into how they're feeling, and it will help us adjust our communication to get the best outcome out of it, because we understand better what their situation is. Also, they will respond much better to us because they will just have a sense that you care. And especially when people are emotional or upset or angry, we look for that empathy, and we put much more value on empathy than we do on logic. It's a bit counterintuitive, but if I'm really angry or I'm really stressed or I'm anxious or upset about something and I'm looking for somebody else's help, what I really want to see is in their eyes, do they care about me? I don't really care that much about the rules or the procedures as much as, are they on my side? There's a great expression which is, people don't care what you know, they just want to know that you care. And there's great value and strength in that. So it's another reason why we should concentrate on skills like eye contact and giving the other person our attention. Because if we don't, it looks like we don't care. It looks like we're not interested. It's the opposite of empathy. If you really want to help people and engage with people communication-wise, try and really foster that sense of empathy. Look at those people and try and think to yourself, what must it be like to be them right now? What are they going through right now? And try and put yourself in their shoes for a while. Active listening is more than just hearing the other person. It's actually showing the other person that you're listening. So how do we do that? There are 3 steps to heaven, and there's 3 steps to active listening. Step 1 is focus on the speaker. Give them your full attention. So we're looking for eye contact, we're looking for putting the newspaper down, put your mobile phone down, stop watching telly, and face them and give them your full attention. Okay? If you don't do those things, then it's another trigger. It just winds people up because they don't think you're interested, they don't think you're paying attention. So stop what you're doing and give them your full attention. Step 2 is demonstrate that you're listening. And how do you do that? Well, we do that through all the nodding, the body language signals, the noises, ooh, no, oh, You ever listen to somebody on the phone and they're not speaking? If they're good listeners, they'll be making lots of little grunts and noises. This is the universal signal for I'm on the phone, by the way. It's the mime. And if we don't get those little signals, those questions, he did what? Why did he do that? You're joking. If we don't get that feedback, remember the communication model at the start? We talked about it being two-way, and somebody just stares at us. It's really hard to keep that conversation going if we don't get that feedback. So you want to give the speaker some sense that you want them to keep going. Psychologically, we're saying, keep going, I'm interested, I want to hear more. Okay, so we demonstrate that we're listening. And step 3 is you think about what the speaker is saying. And this is that empathy point again. Okay, and if you don't think about what the other person is saying, but you do the first 2 steps, then you are faking listening. And we've all done it, and we've all been caught out, and it's usually very embarrassing. So think about what the other person is saying. Don't pretend to listen, listen and empathize. Ask yourself, what must it be like for them right now? What are they going through? Empathy and active listening are the 2 strongest communication skills you can ever develop. And the nice thing is they're fairly straightforward. With a bit of practice, we can all get really good at them. They're great in conflict management. They're great in dealing with people who are emotional or upset, very heightened. You'd be surprised if you just shut up and listen to somebody and empathize, how often angry people will calm down, emotional people will feel reassured, your friends will think you're a great communicator. It's one of the easiest things to do. Now, it's worth mentioning there are things that sometimes get in the way of communication, are barriers to communication. Things like environmental issues. So if someone is cold or hot or in pain or uncomfortable, they need the toilet or any of these kind of things, we term those environmental barriers. And what we mean by that is it's something going on around them or within them physically. If you have a raging toothache and the other person is trying to talk to you, you're going to find it really hard to focus on what they're saying. Equally, if you're really hungry or you're desperate to go to the loo or it's freezing outside. So if you want to get on with somebody and you want the communication to be really effective and you realize there's one of these environmental barriers, you have to kind of deal with it if you can first. So if it's a really noisy place, if you're on a busy street or you're in a really noisy situation and you're struggling to hear each other, that's an environmental barrier. So you have to deal with that. So sometimes it can be a good idea to say, let's just go over here where it's a bit quieter, and then things should roll a bit smoother after that. If they're too cold, you can go indoors or a warmer location, or if they're too hot, or if they're hungry, we'll do this after lunch, or get the environmental barrier out of the way. Don't try and battle your way through it if you can help it. The other kind of barrier that we sometimes deal with are attitudinal. And all that means is the barrier is the way the person thinks. You sometimes get this if you are in a position of, or perceived to be in a position of authority. If you work for the council or the police, you're a teacher or something. Sometimes people have little mental blocks, or if people are just prejudiced. They've got some sort of internal prejudice against a group that you belong to. So we've packed a lot in there into a very short video, and obviously it's the express checkout version. We've raced through it at some pace. Normally when I do a communication skills session, it's at least 3 hours. So you can see we've squeezed a lot in very quickly, and we've also left a lot out. But I hope it was of use to you. Here's some homework for you though. I'd like you to practice 2 things from now on. Just give them a little shot for the next week or 2. Firstly, active listening. Remember the 3 steps were focus on the speaker, demonstrate that you're listening, and think about what they're saying. Okay, I want you to practice that. And I want you to also practice empathizing with people, showing them that you care. So you might be talking to your partner, your kids, anybody. on the computer, Zooming, whatever it is you're doing at the moment in self-isolation. But next time you talk to people, you should just think to yourself, okay, let's just stop talking, let them talk, and we're just going to practice our active listening. We're going to practice our empathizing. We're going to demonstrate to them that we're with them and that we care about them, and say to yourself, what must it be like what they're going through right now? How must they be feeling? Try that for the next week or two. Just really set yourself that little target and just see how much your communication improves. And I guarantee you, those people will walk away from those encounters with you feeling a lot more about you. They'll really think a lot more of you, and they'll have got a lot more out of those conversations than you probably realise. Hope that was of use to you. Until the next video, take care, stay safe, goodbye.